New Jersey, Democrat Jim Florio and Republican Jim Courter. Tonight's debate will be coming to you live from our Channel 6 studio in Trenton and will be simulcast on our sister station in New York City, WABC. The candidates are required under state election law to hold at least 2 televised debates in order to use public funds in their campaigns. These 2 candidates are both currently members of the Congress. When they last met back on September 25th, they wasted no time criticizing each other's records on abortion, the environment, auto insurance, the death penalty, and personal ethics. We can expect more of the same tonight, and we'll also get a chance to see the question each other on the issues. Now, live to Trenton, and Jim Gardner and WABC's Bill Butel.
Good evening. I'm Bill Butel of WABC TV.
And I'm Jim Gardner of WPVI TV. Welcome to a debate between the candidates for Governor of New Jersey.
Perhaps you've heard about the candidates, read about them, or seen their advertisements. Tonight, they are with us in Trenton to discuss the issues face-to-face in what we hope is going to be a lively and informative exchange. And here are the candidates. Jim Florio, the Democratic nominee and a U.S. Congressman from Camden County. Jim Courter, the Republican nominee, a U.S. Congressman from Warren County. Both candidates won their respective parties' nominations in the statewide primary last June.
Our format tonight is rather informal. It features questions from reporters with answers and discussion from the candidates. And later, the candidates will get the opportunity to talk directly to each other about the topics they want to discuss. Each will have a closing statement, of course, at the end. The format and the content were controlled and are controlled by WPVI TV and WABC TV and accepted by the candidates. Sponsorship of this debate was granted by the New Jersey Election Law Enforcement Commission.
Asking questions of the candidates, along with Jim Gardner and me, are Sal Palantonio, a political reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, who covers New Jersey politics, and Joe Astrid Gladdy, Trenton Bureau Chief for the Associated Press.
The order of the candidates was determined by a coin flip before this program. Sal Palantonio has the first question, and it goes to Jim Florio.
Congressman Florio, your grandson Matthew is in elementary school in suburban Camden County during your first term as governor, and a crisis has developed at the school. Parents find out that Matthew's teacher is an avowed homosexual who has AIDS. Parents are removing their children from the class, and they are picketing the school, and the school board doesn't know what to do. And your son comes to you for advice. Yes or no, Congressman Florio, should your son keep Matthew in the classroom, and why?
Well, Sal, you've got 2 parts to the question. One is the question of being an avowed homosexual. Does that somehow reflect upon the teacher's capability to teach? And the answer is no, that does not. Absent evidence that somehow the teacher is not qualified or in some way has endangered the students' well-being. The question with regard to AIDS, at this point, what we've all determined is that the very fact of carrying the affliction, the basic HIV genes, is something that in and of itself does not require that there be people taken out of contact. That mere contact in terms of being in the presence of someone doesn't provide for AIDS to be transmitted. And I guess the only other thing I'd like to say to you, Sal, and to the audience, is that I'm hopeful that tonight will be a good, positive opportunity for us to share our views in a constructive way. I hope this doesn't turn into the Martin Downey show, and I guess we'll all be working very hard to see that that's the case. I've got some things that I want to talk to people about why it is that I think New Jersey should be doing some things to lower automobile insurance rates and preserve our environment. All of those things I think we can talk about tonight.
So Jim Courter.
I think according to the rules I get a chance to respond here, and I want to thank Jim Florio. I hope this is a positive, and unlike your ads, I hope we can talk about the issues, Jim. I mean that very sincerely. With the question, if someone is an avowed homosexual and they're teaching, that has nothing to do with it. We want good teachers. I think that's very important. But I really differ from Congressman Florio. If there was a child, for example, of a very young age that did have AIDS, I think they'd have to be treated in a separate and a special way, given love in a very separate and special way. Because young children do get nosebleeds on playgrounds, and if other parents knew about that, I think they'd be leaving the school. So a very young child that gets nosebleeds, that gets into fights on playgrounds, I think would have to go into a different type of a school that would give him or her the same type of education, but not in such a way that he'd risk his classmates.
Sal,
I
do you
guess-
follow?
So the question...
Yeah, the question was with regard to the teacher. So
Right.
I think maybe Jim misunderstood the question.
Well, the answer that you gave was a yes, that Matthew should stay in the classroom. So as governor, if your answer is yes, would you instruct your education commissioner to force or to tell parents to put their children back in that classroom even though they didn't want to?
Well, I think we have in the case of the educational system in New Jersey. Again, just to make it clear, we're talking about the teacher having the HIV gene as opposed to the student. Is that
That's correct.
okay? So with regard to the teacher, as long as the teacher is not a risk in terms of transmitting anything, and the medical evidence is, in fact, that it is not a risk, one doesn't get AIDS from walking in the same area as someone else, that doesn't automatically disqualify someone from teaching or doing anything else. There are other things doing for all people, not just for teachers. But the very fact of being an avowed homosexual and carrying the AIDS virus is not something that automatically means someone is going to contract AIDS.
If I can jump in here, and I appreciate about the informality of this type of debate, I think it's a very good one. I disagree again. If we're talking about the teacher that is an avowed homosexual, I have no problem, no concern about that. But if it is obvious that the teacher is a carrier, test positive HIV, I think that person should be removed for two reasons. Number one, there can be types of contacts with young children that would carry out that AIDS, bleeding, that sort of thing. Secondly, I know that many parents would be very upset and very concerned about it. Also, and finally, those people that have that type of dreaded disease have high absentee rates, have high sickness rates. And I think because of all those reasons, it's best to have teachers be good teachers, number one. Number two, not be discriminated on the basis of their race, not be discriminated on the basis of their sexual orientation. But if they are a carrier of AIDS, I don't think they should be teaching young children.
Joe Gladding, you have a question for Congressman Corder.
Congressman, you said in the first debate that if your teenage daughter became pregnant, you'd urge her to carry the baby to term, but
Yes,
you'd tell her that she had options. But you have a long anti-abortion voting record. As recently as August in D.C. from using Medicaid funds to pay for abortions, even if the mother's life is in danger. If you would tell your own daughter that she has options, why have you fought so long to take the option of abortion away from American women?
My position on abortion has been very clear. It's been consistent over the years, I might say. I'm personally opposed to abortion except for threat to the life of the mother, rape, or incest. I recognize the fact that we do have a Constitution in the state of New Jersey. That Constitution protects a woman's access to abortion. I am not going to impose my personal views on the 3.5 million women of the state of New Jersey. Only they can change the Constitution. And I might go on, Joe. I don't think there's a consensus in the state of New Jersey on changing the Constitution with regard to that area. So in my mind, irrespective of who is governor, whether it be Jim Corder or Jim Florio, that particular area, and the legislation is not going to be changed.
Congressman Florio?
Well, I guess the only real bottom line question here is a matter of choice. And of course, the constitutional protections that we have in New Jersey are based upon the case in the Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade, which of course Jim has actively sought to have overturned. It is conceivable that the court could overturn it. As a matter of fact, that's what has a lot of people very much concerned. And the real question then is that if that is overturned and Jim Corder is the governor, what's Jim's position with regard to legislation that comes to his desk that says that a woman should not have the right to choose? Do you sign that or do you not sign it?
I mean, the point here is that regardless of what the United States Supreme Court is going to do, Jim, the Constitution in the state of New Jersey does protect a woman's access to abortion. And your position, contrary to mine, your position has been sliding all over the lot.
Mr. Corder, if I might follow up.
Can I finish that statement?
Go ahead, Troy.
If I may, thank you very much. You've been sliding. I mean, in the very beginning of your career, you were a speaker for the pro-life movement. You equated pro-choice to those people working in Nazi Germany. You really did. After the Supreme Court decision came down around July of this year, you said, regardless of the legislation that comes before me, I would veto it. 3 weeks later, you said, well, if the legislation has to do with parental notice, I'd consider it. Then I read in Newsweek magazine that you're advocating parental consent. So you've been sliding around the issue, and I clearly believe that I've been consistent. I respect people's options to get an abortion in the state of New Jersey, and I respect that Constitution. I'm not advocating a change in that Constitution, but at least I've been consistent personally.
Joe, let me just
You've
respond to that
consistent in
point,
your
because I think
voting
it really is something that's kind of interesting. That Jim is kind of lamenting that over a 15-year period, I have changed my views.
No, you did
and
it
over
in
a
30 days.
5-week period,
Jimmy, you did it in 30 days.
He has voted to say, as you indicated, no abortions, even to save the life of a mother.
If I may...
5 months ago, Jim signed the brief to ask the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade,
so
to
we
cut
can
away
have a
all
debate.
of the rights.
You signed the brief so we can have a debate in the state of New Jersey. There's nothing wrong with democracy in the state of New Jersey. You can smile if you want to. And talk about changing or evolving. You've evolved and now re-evolved. And it's not been over a long period of time. It's been in a matter of 30 days.
Okay.
Mr. Corder, can I follow up?
Go ahead, Joe.
Only a few months ago, you said during the Republican primary that if you were elected governor, you'd sign a bill to ban abortions. Recently, you say that you won't impose beliefs on New Jersey women. Why should voters trust that if you're elected, you won't change your mind again?
Number one, the Constitution makes it impossible for people to have restrictions on abortion. Number two, I've said over and over again, although I have my personal convictions, those convictions are not going to be imposed on the people of the state of New Jersey. Number three, the governor can't change the Constitution, only the people can. And I'm going to abide by that.
The President of the United States is leading a campaign to amend the Constitution of the United States to prohibit burning the flag. I mean, isn't it reasonable for a chief executive to lead a campaign to change the Constitution of a state, a country, or anything else for that matter?
Absolutely. If the Constitution, if you think there's a vacuum in the Constitution, you try to change it.
And there is no vacuum. And there is no vacuum in the New Jersey Constitution vis-a-vis abortion. Is that correct?
There was a vacuum in the Constitution with regard to women's rights. That's why I proposed and voted for an equal rights amendment to the United States Constitution. So if you feel strongly about something, yes, you change it. With respect to abortion in the state of New Jersey, our Constitution is clear. I see no consensus in the state of New Jersey to change that Constitution.
And you don't feel strongly about it?
I'm not going to advocate trying to make that change. I respect the women of this state, and I'm not going to impose my personal views on the 3.5
If there were a consensus that you saw, if you were to see a consensus for a change, would you lead that campaign to change? It's a
hypothetical question. I certainly would agree that if there was a consensus to have, for example, parents be notified before their 13-year-old daughters could get an abortion paid for by taxpayers. If that was constitutional or made constitutional by an amendment, I certainly could see myself signing that type of legislation.
I'm not sure it would be inappropriate to spend this entire debate talking about the abortion issue because it is that compelling and people are that concerned, but there are other issues, and so let's go on. Congressman Florio, it would be hard to find a politician in New Jersey, other than yourself perhaps, who would say that Jim Florio, who would not say that Jim Florio controls Camden County government. Yet there are now reported to be 5 investigations at a federal, state, and local level into alleged political corruption in county. The former treasurer of your 1981 gubernatorial campaign, Joseph Rudy, was appointed Camden County administrator. He then deposited $2 million in county funds into the troubled Continental Bank, in which you held a 15% interest. We know that as you got ready for this campaign, you sold your share and donated whatever profits there were to Trenton State College. You have said that the incident is not illegal, is not unethical, but that politicians are now held to a higher standard. Did you not violate that higher standard that you yourself have defined?
No, Jim, because there's no one that's even made any type of a representation that I, in any way, benefited from any of the things that have taken place in Camden County. What I've tried to convey is that what it is that's been business as usual, not only in Camden County, but in every other county in the state and the state government. We just saw an interesting report that came out on the Parkway Authority just this last day or two about no-bid contracts, revolving door government. That's the norm. I have, and I'm the person that's put out the ethics statement and the policy as to how we're going to change that here in New Jersey, how it is that we're going to be shooting for higher levels. I'm the one that has disclosed everything that I own, my wife and I own. Full disclosure is the key to openness, and that's the key to integrity in government. I would hope that Jim Corder would get around to disclosing things. Income tax returns, best way to show how people make their money and how it is that they earn their money. I have done that 6 months ago. I made public my income tax returns. I would hope that Jim would do that as well.
When do you plan to do that,
It's very
Mr. Corder?
interesting.
Mr. Corder, when do you plan to do that?
Congressman Florio has not revealed his income tax return. He did for the last year. But that very interesting Continental Bank deal, and if we can talk about the deal, it was improper. Everybody knows that it was rife with conflict of interest. There was people that were on the board of directors of a failing bank, number one. Those same individuals were in charge in the county. Those same individuals got money from the county to bail out the bank. They set up a shell corporation and had the bank sell the property to the shell corporation at a huge profit. Congressman Florio has cut in on the deal without putting up a nickel. He made $53,000 without putting up a thin dime. Now, that was wrong. He didn't admit it the last debate that it was wrong. He should admit it today that it was wrong. And let him talk about, if he wants to talk about income tax returns, let him reveal those income tax returns of 1985 and 86, and during that period of time when that Continental Bank deal was going on. Secondly, I might say, I have disclosed all my assets. We've got a little informality here.
I know, but we are running out of time.
I know, but I've disclosed all my assets. Every time I've made a transaction, I've done that. I had my tax returns audited. I've gone beyond the letter of the law in every single case, and I've put my assets in a blind trust. I have done what Tom Kane's done. I've done what Frank Lautenberg has done. I've done what Bill Bradley has done. So I'm asking Congressman Jim Florio, why don't you put your assets in a blind trust, just like those three individuals, just like Jim Corder?
I assume you'll be as generous with the time on me as well.
Of course.
This is humorous almost. I mean, it's an interesting thing that Jim Corder, well, first of all, so much for the positive, constructive discussion here tonight. But let me just say that Jim Corder talks about me putting things in a blind trust. My 82 Ford Escort, if it goes into a blind trust, I can't find it, so I can drive it. Everything that Lucinda and I own is not worth as much as Jim Corder's summer vacation home in Florida. I didn't go to Washington as a non-millionaire and come back as a multi-millionaire. We have a situation where Jim Corder is lamenting the fact that I haven't made public my income tax returns. I have. The press has them. Unquestionably the full returns that are out there.
Mr. Corder, you will get a chance. You will get a chance. Mr. Florio, if I may interrupt.
He has already said that he's not going to do that. The obvious question is, what is there to hide by refusing to put out one's income tax?
Joe Rudy, what he did, right or wrong, and if you are governor, would he have a place in your administration?
The answer is there are no personnel,
it's a short answer.
No personnel decisions that have been made with regard to anybody in an administration that elected first. The system that allows revolving door government and no bid contracts is wrong. That system is the system now. I'm going to change the system. But I think it's important to note that what we have here is Jim Corder refusing to tell us how he went to Congress with $600,000 and is now a multi-millionaire. We've been reading about the stock deals. We've been reading about being sued for fraud on land. We've been reading about all of these things, but it has to be newspaper interviews
Jim,
to bring this information out.
You're clearly more comfortable. I can see you relax when you talk about those types of things. You seem to enjoy it. Now we know that Joe Rudy will be part of your administration. You can't, to this very day, say that what he did was wrong and improper. You can look me in the eye if you'd like to. I know it's sometimes difficult for you. Why don't you just look me in the eye? Second, I was not, Jim, look at me. I was not written up in a national magazine about how to get rich in Congress. You were. And with respect to my assets going up since I was a member of Congress, you know as well as I do, it's in the most unfortunate way. My mother passed away.
Are you suggesting, Mr. Florio, that Mr. Corder's wealth did go up because of something improper since entering the Congress?
I'm suggesting that the newspapers have written the stories about trading in defense stocks while one is on the Armed Services Committee.
But that does sound improper.
One has also sold land to the state of New Jersey and used congressional efforts to get the deal expedited. So, I mean, this isn't a matter of speculation. This is already out there on the public record.
As they say in some of the news interview programs, let's get out and change the subject right now. Mr. Carter.
Maybe we ought to say, let's climb out and get to another time.
Either way. Question for you, Mr. Carter. As you very well know, the people of New Jersey, as the people of practically every urban state in the country, are very concerned about the environment. Now, it happens that the New Jersey Environmental Federation says that of all the congressmen representing New Jersey, you have the worst, and your opponent has the best as a matter of interest, you have the worst record on the issue of environment. Yet your commercials, radio and TV commercials, your advertisements over the past few months have attempted to portray you, yourself, as an environmental champion, a champion of the environment. Are you not a little bit deceptive here?
No, not at all. That organization has endorsed about 92% of Republicans. It's interesting that those organizations that have
92% of Republicans?
Democrats. Thank you for catching me. I appreciate it. It's basically an organization that endorses Democrats. As a matter of fact, those organizations that endorse Congressman Florio and not me, that are environmental, didn't endorse Tom Kean in 1981. And Tom Kean is very environmentally concerned, as Jim Porter is very concerned. So there's politics going on here. You know it, and I know it. Secondly, indeed, yes, I'm proud of my environmental record. The first, irrespective of what he hinted in the last debate and getting a little applause line, the first Superfund site in the state of New Jersey was cleaned up in my congressional district. I've taken the lead in banning oil and gas on the New Jersey coast. I voted in favor. I've taken the lead in plastics. I've advocated additional spending to make sure that our sewage treatment facilities are upgraded. It's been my proposal, advocated and praised in the Bergen Record and other important papers in the state of New Jersey, to divide up the Department of Environmental Protection. So one part can have to do with the problem of cleaning up the environment, and another part has to do with the preservation of historical space and natural resources. So my environmental record is excellent, and I'm proud of it. And I am going to be a type of governor that improves the environment of the state of New Jersey, just like the past governor.
Mr. Florio, I suspect you have a response to that.
Chutzpah.
Chutzpah.
I mean, you really have to stretch
to
make the case.
Jim.
And it's interesting. After putting in his ad that he received this award, which turned out to be a non-award from the Sierra Club, now the Sierra Club, which endorsed me, is somehow just a phony organization. That ought to go to the question of deceptive advertising. Jim Porter has been in the forefront of those who have tried to stop us from cleaning up toxic waste. He voted. I wrote the provision in the law that said the polluters should pay. He voted against making the polluters pay to make sure that the taxpayers paid. His good friend, Jack Kemp, who supported me on that issue, said that what Jim Porter wanted to do was to impose a sales tax on everyone to make them clean up toxic waste. This is not even a close call.
His time is over.
Gentlemen, I think Bill has a follow-up.
I have a follow-up, but I'd like to address it to both of you people. You talk about toxic waste. You have been accused of putting toxic waste on your property. You've answered that question. By him, yes. But the fact of the matter is there are still more toxic waste sites in the state of New Jersey than any place else. Now, you, Mr. Florio, wrote the Superfund Act. You, Mr. Carter, say you're an environmentalist. Why is New Jersey still loaded with all these toxic waste sites?
I think it's important to keep in mind, where did they start cleaning them up? Which was the first one to be cleaned up? The first one to be cleaned up was in my congressional district.
Did you have anything to do with making sure it was cleaned up?
Yes, we had. In fact, we had a press conference there. Interestingly, during the last debate, the man to my right suggested they had to call him. We checked into it. We had Democrats in that congressional district. We had the business manager of that town, who is a Democrat, say to me, look, don't get me in trouble with the Democratic Party, but Jim Florio had nothing to do with this hazardous waste sites. And I'll talk to the press about that. So we're cleaning up this material left and right. I might also add, Jim Florio's first Superfund legislation wanted to make sure that 50% of the people paid for cleaning it up, not the business industries. And the issue with respect to that one vote, what I wanted to do is to make sure not only the petrochemical industry, not only the pharmaceutical industry paid to clean up Superfund sites, but all business that added to Superfund sites should pay it up. That is the proper interpretation of my amendment, although he doesn't agree with it.
As we go around for a second series of questions, actually, this has been my fault. We've been a little too generous with our time.
So we're running out of
In the
questions?
interests of informality, we're going to be just a bit more stringent for the second go-around, so please cooperate with us if you can. Joe Gladding for Jim Florio.
Mr. Florio, since you've been in Congress, you've seen the city of Camden in your own district disintegrate into an urban disaster, and it's one of the nation's poorest cities. If, as a congressman, you've been unable to halt Camden's decline, why should voters believe that you'll do any better as governor reviving Camden and all of the state's impoverished cities?
Well, I guess the first response is, of course, that the people in the city of Camden, the leadership in the city of Camden, happen to be endorsing my candidacy. Of course, they think that as governor, I'm going to be able to marshal the forces to continue the revitalization of the city of Camden. They also know, and urban people around the state know, that my record in Washington has been to support the only hope for the urban areas that have been coming out of Washington. UDAG programs, community development block grant programs, those programs that can help be a catalyst to leverage private funds into those areas. Jim Courter, on the other hand, has been in the forefront of getting rid of all of those programs. The record obviously can be checked, and to find out when it was required that someone be there to make the decisions as to whether we vote for billions for Star Wars or monies for our cities, Jim Courter made his choice. I made my choice. I'm comfortable with that choice. So what we have here is an opportunity to be able to have someone who is committed to making sure that we are the governor of one New Jersey, not two New Jerseys, one that's doing very well, and then the urban areas that need an awful lot of help.
Mr. Courter?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say that Jim Florio has failed at the grade in getting federal money to Camden. It's been horrible. That's number one. Number two, as the governor said just not some time ago, that in the Camden area, if you throw a can in the trash, if you flush a toilet, if you commit your uncle, there's a friend of Jim Florio's that gets cut in on the action. The governor has said that Camden is the most corrupt city and the most corrupt county in the state of New Jersey, and he does not want to export that which we have in Camden to the rest of the state of New Jersey. With respect to the UDAG grants, that's Jim Florio math. It doesn't work. When I vote responsibly for taxpayers to make sure that a 10% increase isn't a 12% increase, he calls that a 2% cut. It's a 10% increase, so he's wrong there as well.
Congressman Florio, the experts and the urban leaders say that without property tax reform, unless there's a shift away from the property taxpayer to other kinds of taxes, the cities will never come back. Both of you have avoided talking about property tax reform during this campaign, and cynics say that you do because it'll cost you suburban votes. Are the cynics right?
Well, Joe, you're wrong, though, on the question of property tax relief. I've been talking through the course of the whole campaign about how the money from the state has been siphoned off from the programs that were designed to provide property tax relief. And that what I've said is that I'm going to conduct a state audit, the first one in 20 years since Governor Cahill did it, to find out where the $20 billion in new revenues that the state derived went to. There was supposed to be $2 billion of that going for additional local property tax relief. That would have resulted in property taxes across this state not increasing as they did by 122%, but increasing only by 7%. So that's the way we get some property tax relief.
A quick comment, Mr. Courter.
Yeah, a very quick comment. Now, number one, we are auditing. If the governor's listening to this debate, I'm sure he's laughing at the present time. You're trying to put yourself out as a fiscal responsible person. Every taxpayer group in the world that thinks you're a big spender, you know that. We all know that. The bottom line here is the fact that what we need to do is to have disciplines on spending. We need a cap on state spending, a cap on the number of state employees. I'm in favor of those things, and he's against them. In Washington, D.C., if I can go on just for 1 minute because it's important. In Washington, D.C., he fought us tooth and nail to put some discipline in spending against line item vetoes, against caps, against balanced budget amendments to the United States Constitution.
Sal Palantonio for Mr. Courter.
Yeah, since we're on the subject of state finances, let's continue on that, Congressman Courter. When Tom Kean ran for governor against Jim Florio in 1981, he promised not to raise the state's income tax. But in his first year as governor, Kean raised the sales tax and the income tax. Then this year, he raised corporate taxes. You were Tom Kean's campaign chairman in 1981, and now you promise that you will not raise taxes. How do we know you're telling the truth?
And the election's between Jim Courter and Jim Florio, and as campaign manager, you don't become governor. What I'm telling you is the fact that my whole background is consistent with the type of fiscal responsibility that I talk. During the past number of years as a member of Congress, I voted to cut taxes 3 times. The gentleman over here voted to increase taxes 16 times, year after year after year. I've advocated line item vetoes. I've advocated balanced budget amendments. I voted for caps. He opposed us in Washington every single time. Running for governor, I'm going to go beyond that. Not only will I be consistent with my past record, and you're exactly right, you can't just listen to the words of someone running for governor. You have to look at their prior history, their voting pattern. Look at mine. It's consistent with responsible government. And as I'm running for governor, I'm saying I want to impose 2 other disciplines. One is a cap on the number of employees, and number 2, a cap on state services. Those are things that I want to do.
Mr. Florio,
go look at the record. You got a sort of a reverse Robin Hood. What we've been doing is out there in 1981 cutting taxes for the people at the very top, and then in 1982 he voted for the largest tax increase in the history of the United States, something like $98 billion.
Jim,
that's been the history straight on through. What we have is a situation where over a 10-year period, Jim Cotter has voted for something like $275 billion worth of tax increases. It's fact. You can look it up, but the question is who gets those tax benefits that he supports, and who is it that pays the tax increases?
You have to, what you have to do.
I have just a follow-up question for 1 minute, please.
Well, that was a very inaccurate statement by Jim Florio.
And you'll have an opportunity to respond to it.
Thank you.
But give Sal an opportunity.
Yes,
during the campaign,
Sal a chance.
During the campaign, you have pledged not to raise the income tax. Will you make that pledge tonight?
Yes.
And
I even signed a statement on that.
All right, and you said a couple of days ago you wouldn't raise the sales or corporate taxes in Trenton to report it. So you're saying that.
That is correct.
And everybody is predicting at least a $500 million shortfall in state revenues. State revenues are already down. You're not going to raise taxes. What are you going to cut to balance the budget?
Well, keep 2 things in mind. Number 1, that budget for fiscal 1990 had a $250 million surplus, so there's that. Keep in mind as well that you're looking at statistics for 2.5 months. I've looked at them for an additional 15 days on that 3rd month, and they're going up, not going down. I'm an optimist. But I'll make the statement, and I'll be consistent with my record, consistent with my voting record. If, in fact, a year from now, we find that we have to balance the budget by making some cuts of $500 million in a $12 billion budget, I will do it. I'll have the auditors, I'll have the best advice, I'll have all the material, and as well, you know what I may do? I may have to freeze state employment. I may have to lay off some bureaucrats. The gentleman over there says, number 1, although I have a history of raising every tax I ever saw 16 times in my 16 years in Congress, if I become governor, I'm not going to raise taxes. The real question is, how can he be consistent with his record? And in order to get one of those coveted big endorsements again, he promised not to lay off 1 state employee.
Excuse me, I'm violating my own rule, but Sal asked you what you would cut to balance the budget. I'd be interested in a specific answer.
It's a hypothetical question. We don't know there's going to be a $500 million deficit in 11.5 months from now, and I'm saying that the way the budget was crafted, it showed a $250 million surplus. And I'm also telling you that although revenues are not as robust as anticipated, they're going up in July, in August, and September.
Bill Butel, you the next question.
Mr. Florio, the polls and simple knowledge of the street alike say that the people of New Jersey are very worried about drugs and the crime the drugs cause. Your opponent says the death penalty law in New Jersey should be changed to assure that the death penalty will be used. He says the death penalty law in New Jersey is simply a paper tiger because it is not used. He says it should be used in cases of drug kingpins, cop killers, and murderers. You, however, oppose tightening the death penalty law. You say it would cause confusion and delay, but I ask you, what is wrong with using the death penalty as a kind of tool for fighting drugs and the crime caused by drugs in New Jersey?
Absolutely nothing. And that's why I support the death penalty and want to see it utilized. What Jim Cotter is saying is he wants to change the death penalty now, which of course will ensure that for the next 10 years it will not be used because you'll have to go through the whole review process that we're on the verge of completing. Governor Kane agrees with me that we should not change it. The Attorney General agrees with me. All of the Republican-appointed prosecutors agree with me. And most importantly, the police agree with me. The Fraternal Order of Police, statewide organization, in endorsing me, said that my view makes sense. Yesterday, the state troopers of the state said that they agreed with me and subscribed to my views on not only that issue, but the other important police issue, which is to ban assault weapons. They want to ban assault weapons now. All those people I just mentioned also agree with me, the governor, the attorney general, that we ought to pass the Graves bill, which will ban assault weapons, take them out of the hands of those drug traffickers that are literally shooting at our police, and to be done with it. Jim Courter is the only person I know of any public actor who says that no, he doesn't support the Graves bill.
You know as well as I do that I support the elimination of assault weapons, and the Graves bill is flawed. I have one to make sure, Jim, to get off the street those type of cop killer weapons, those assault weapons that are dangerous to law enforcement in the United States of America, in the state of New Jersey. The Assembly, your party as well, overwhelmingly voted for legislation to amend the death penalty in the state of New Jersey. The people know it doesn't work. And you can ask the people. 14 times out of 14 times, the death penalty has been reviewed by the Supreme Court of the state of New Jersey, and they've been thrown out. As far as I'm concerned, and the people of the state of New Jersey are concerned, if your car doesn't start 14 mornings in a row, it's broken. The death penalty is broken. You don't want a real death penalty. I want a real deterrent, and that's an issue that divides us.
But, Mr. Courter, you want to change the certain provisions when the death penalty would be used. For example, you want the law changed so that one juror cannot prohibit the use of the death penalty. There's some question about due process in there, I think.
There's no question about due process whatsoever. As you know, Bill, those trials are bifurcated. Right. There is a guilt part, and I'm not interfering with that at all. Then there's the penalty part of the trial. What I want to do is change some of the law with regard to the penalty parts of that particular thing, to make sure, for example, I mean, if you beat me till I died, you may be exposed to the death penalty. If a Charles Manson came to the state of New Jersey and directed that others be butchered and murdered, that Charles Manson be exposed to the death penalty in the state of Jersey. And on the aggravating and mitigating circumstances, the legislature changed the burden. I want to go back to where it was before, so we can, as a matter of fact, use the death sentence in the state of New Jersey to make sure it's a real deterrent. The people stand with me. The legislature stands with me. The police officers stand with me. We need a death penalty that is a real deterrent in the state of New Jersey.
Asserting just doesn't make it the case. I mean, the Attorney General and the Governor and the police organizations have all come out specifically on those two issues, assault weapons and the Graves bill and the death penalty, and clearly said, after extensive interviews with regard to the police situation, that Jim Courter is wrong. And the fact of the matter is, he is.
Mr. Courter, when you were at Colgate University back in 1959, you joined a fraternity whose national chapter just 3 years prior to that eliminated a clause in its charter that limited membership to, quote, male white persons of full Aryan blood. Even while you were a member of this fraternity at Colgate, the fraternity maintained the so-called blackballing rule that required 100% membership vote to admit a pledge. As a young man, not as a seasoned public official, but as a young man in Colgate University back in 1959, don't you think you showed a certain obliviousness to racial sensibilities, racial sensitivities, racial justice to join such a fraternity?
No, even to be frank, in 1959, I was very proud to be a member of Phi Delta Theta. There's campuses of Phi Delta Theta in the state of New Jersey. They have black members, as you know now. Had I bothered to read the charter and the bylaws, not many students do that. Now, the charter and bylaws would have said it had no exclusionary language whatsoever. So that was amended when I was in high school. And to charge me with the responsibility of a clause that was eliminated 5 years or 4 years before I went to college is ridiculous. It had no exclusionary language whatsoever, Colgate University, and that fraternity in the years that you cite.
Your fraternity was one of 4 fraternities on campus that, even while you were there, were part of a major controversy.
No, that's not true.
Primarily because of the 100% blackball rule.
To controversy whatsoever when I was there. There was a controversy about 3 years later. I was a member of the United States Peace Corps in Central America when there's some disturbance on campus. I didn't know that disturbance occurred. But to charge me with wrongdoing when I was serving in the Peace Corps in type of a outreach program to poor people is just monstrous. There was a problem on campus that occurred about 3 to 4 years after I'd left.
You made the statement that you joined the fraternity, or one of the reasons why you joined the fraternity was to work from the inside to resolve these kinds of problems?
No, I did. I joined the fraternity because I thought it was a good fraternity, and it was. The fraternity was ranked #1 academically of all fraternities. I was president of the Senior Honor Society. We had the captains of all major teams. Academically, our fraternity was #1. That's the reason I joined the fraternity. It was a good fraternity.
Any rebuttals?
Well, I'm less concerned about Jim's insensitivity or lack of insensitivity at that point than I am over the last 10 years. I mean, the various civil rights organizations that have done the ratings on those issues of concern to ensure civil rights and human rights give Jim, unfortunately, very bad marks. Likewise, even in the course of this campaign, his initial position of saying that homosexuals should be automatically disqualified for certain types of jobs, and then of course he changed his mind and then denied that he said what he said in the first place. That, I think, is more of a concern because it indicates that there's not the full sensitivity to this whole concept of bringing people together, which is the essence of the democratic process. So I'm concerned about that insensitivity that's been demonstrated through the course of this campaign and in the last 10 years, rather than something that happened 20 years ago.
Let me just talk about my record. Civil rights brought up. I went to my convention. You didn't go to your convention to introduce civil rights legislation. Important. I introduced the first civil rights legislation that would review and overturn United States Supreme Court decision. I did that. You didn't. I voted in favor of and served on once for a long period of time the Martin Luther King National Holiday Commission. I served. You didn't. I rejoined that commission a little while ago. You have served. I gave money for it. I consider a responsibility and purpose. Also, I might add, during this gubernatorial race, there was a very important forum. It's called the NAACP, an 80-year-old civil rights organization. I went and spoke. Where were you? If you want to show sensitivity, why were not you before the NAACP organization when they invited the two important candidates running for governor of the state of New Jersey? Where were you on that day?
And we'll let you'll be able to do that if you care to.
Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Because
where were you on that day?
I'd like to hear that answer.
Well, all right, go ahead. If you want
Well, let me tell you where I was. And by the way, I notified the organization
Where
about
were you?
3 weeks before it occurred that I had a personal family obligation. They asked me to get Ron Brown, the national chairman, to come, and I did, and they were informed about that. Where I was that it happened to be the 30th of September. That's the day that Lucinda and I decided in 1887. We've got a place that we go to. It's not really our tree, but we regard it as our tree. I promised Lucinda that we were going to have that day to ourselves. I notified the group 3 weeks in advance, and they obviously accepted that. But it was something
Jim,
that was
group,
important.
let me just tell you something. That group was not happy that you did not come. That group was told that you were filming a TV commercial upstate in New York. Then that group was later told that you couldn't come because you're taking a personal day off.
Did you
That's
tell,
an important
Did you
group.
tell the group that you lied when you said that you sponsored the Martin Luther King Day holiday bill,
Jim,
and then you
voted.
didn't?
The sine qua non
And then you
here,
voted
Jim.
against the bill?
You love to use the word lie. I guess that fits your demeanor. And I'm not sure we want a governor of the state of New Jersey that's so flippant with that type of a language. That
Or
doesn't
one that
exactly,
lies.
Jim.
Or one that lies.
That, Jim, does not elevate the debate. So we talked about the fact that I was a server on that commission. We talked about the fact that I served with Mrs. Martin Luther King. We talked about the fact that I raised money, served twice on that Martin Luther King National Holiday.
You quit the commission to give it to Jack Kemp for his election. Now, a month before this election, you came back. That's demeaning for the commission.
Well, they were awfully mad that you were not there, and they were very pleased that I was there, Jim. Let me just tell you that. I know because you missed it. I know because I was there.
I think we'll get the rest of us back into this program for just a moment. Thank you both for your questions and answers. It is time now for the candidates' turn to control the direction of this debate, as they did for the past about 30 seconds or so. For the next few minutes, the candidates will discuss the issues directly with each other. It's kind of like just going on with what the program has been. Each candidate will get a chance to ask a question or raise an issue to his opponent, and we begin with Jim Florio.
I guess the question, and we've conducted this a bit, let me just start off on a reasonable level with regard to a specific issue, health care. Health care is extremely important. We have a crisis that's coming in this state. We have 1 million people who are not eligible for any kind of health care assistance. Our hospital industry is having some serious problems with the uncompensated care trust fund. It's a fund that is having some problems. It provides the monies to the hospitals who take care of these people who have no way of paying the bills. This trust fund expires in 1990. I read in the newspapers in the last few days what your response was to the question as to what you're going to do about it. I was struck by the response, and I guess what I'd like to do is to be able to have you share how it is you're going to deal with this serious impending problem with the voters.
Reauthorize it. It expires periodically. The amount of money comes from general revenue. I'm going to make sure that that uncompensated care trust fund doesn't go out. About 10% of the people of the state of New Jersey need that. Hospitals are reimbursed. There's about 120 hospitals in the state of New Jersey that get funds from that particular trust fund, and it's an important one. I'm advocating that it be continued. You're advocating that it be continued. I don't think there's a real difference between our two positions on the issue. So what's the real question?
There's a real big difference here.
What is the real question?
First of all,
are you going to raise another tax? Jim, you already talked about $1 billion of increased spending next year. I mean, I can add it up. Number one, if it's this, that's even more than that. It has to do with $200 million in the Parkway, has to do $180 million in franchise taxes, had to do another $120 million because of dedication of oil and gasoline tax, a $500 million increase, promised schools. That's $1 billion right there. And also you promised not to lay off one state employee. Now, we have to be honest in this debate. Honest to the people of the state of New Jersey. If you're going to increase spending by $1 billion, if you're going to guarantee that not one individual is going to be laid off, how can you credibly make the promise that you're not going to raise taxes? We know, Jim, you're going to raise taxes. As a matter of fact, ladies and gentlemen, if Jim Florio becomes governor of the state of New Jersey, get out your wallets. If Jimmy the Greek wanted to make a bet, he'd bet if you became governor, you'd raise taxes. You know why? Because he loves a sure thing.
Jim Florio, 30 seconds to respond.
No, more than 30 seconds, because this one's got to be responded to, because now we know why Jim Cotter doesn't show up to the health care forums, because he doesn't know what he's talking about. First and foremost, the uncompensated care trust fund doesn't come out of general revenues. You said you're going to get the money out of general revenues. The uncompensated care trust fund comes from other hospitals.
From other hospitals to general revenues and then goes back down again, Jim. You know where it goes.
General revenues is where you're going to get the money. Do you have any idea how much that is in general revenues? If you're going to get it out of there, a number.
It's a substantial sum of money.
It's a
substantial sum of money, Jim.
$500 million.
Exactly. What are you going to do? Raise taxes for that $1.5 billion?
No, you are, because you just said you're going to take it out of general revenues.
The sum of money first comes to those people that are paying, then goes to a source, which is revenue, and then reverts back to the hospitals.
Wrong. It's a trust fund. It goes to the hospital, into the fund, to the other hospitals. You say no, you're going to take it out of general revenues. That's $500 million, $500 million from the general revenues that you're now going to find. Which taxes are you going to raise to get that money?
Let's move on to another.
Talking about raising taxes, you've been the one that raises taxes.
You're obviously not going to answer the question.
16 times in a row since
$500 million. You just promised.
Congressman Florio.
You promised $500 million.
That is the problem. That is the problem. 16 times you're increasing taxes.
We'll move from the uncompensated health care trust fund to a question now from Jim Cotter directed to Mr. Florio.
Yeah, Jim, you said, or your campaign manager said, that you do not, as a member of Congress, get involved in a judicial process. We found out that you sent a letter to get a dangerous criminal free. We know, first of all, it was denied, and then your statement, your policy was that I guess every once in a while you do sign that type of a letter, using your official capacity to get people out of jail. And the question I have, did there ever come that you flew from Washington, D.C. to testify in a trial against an individual that was charged with killing somebody with an automobile while they were driving drunk? Number one, if that's the case, how others against drunk driving would feel, number one. And number two, if that's the case, who paid for the trip?
It's interesting. The answer is with regard to the letter that you talked about.
Now, how about the other? I'm interested.
You asked the question. Now I will answer the
How about the trip up? You said you didn't become involved. Did you do those things or didn't you?
The question with regard to the letter. This was someone that was eligible for parole, who was recommended, got his high school apparently diploma while he was in the juvenile detention center. And I had no difficulties accepting the recommendation of a local official and translating the local official's name over to the parole board. It was the Kane administration's parole board that ultimately determined that eligible for parole. So I have no problems with regard to that. With regard to testifying on behalf of an employee of mine who was involved in an accident in which someone was killed. The employee was a good employee and was someone that I testified as to his character. The court found that the person was not guilty of the offense that was charged, and I have no difficulties. On behalf of my employees who are good employees, I think there's something to be said for being able to testify and indicate to the court what it is the person's background was.
Who paid for the trip, and who is the gentleman's name?
There's no trip that was involved. This was something in Camden County.
This was, yeah, but it was a Tuesday. You're in Washington, D.C.
The answer is that's not the case.
You're suggesting there is something improper about the trip or about who paid for it?
I'm just trying to find out what it is, because he proudly, through his spokesman, indicated that he, as a member of Congress, does not get involved in judicial matters. Then we find out a letter recommending that someone be released who was a kidnapper, who watched someone's chest being ended. And then we found out later he flew up from Washington, D.C. According to our knowledge, we don't know, we'll give him a chance to respond, that he came and testified on behalf of someone who was charged with drunk driving and killing somebody.
We have to end that discussion, or we leave the discussion portion of our debate. It's time now for the candidate last word in their closing statements. And once again, the order was determined by a flip of a coin before this broadcast. So it is that Jim Florio has the first closing statement. Jim?
Well, thank you. New Jersey's been a very good community for Jim Florio. I come from a working class family. My father was a painter in the Hoboken shipyards. I'm a high school dropout. I quit school at 17 to go into the Navy. But I got a second chance, and I got my equivalency diploma. I worked my way through Trenton State College and Rutgers University Law School. And then, of course, I had an opportunity to run for Congress, and I lost the first time. But I had a second chance again, and I was successful, and I'm proud of the record that I've achieved in Washington. I had a second chance at personal happiness as well when I met Lucinda, and we have a happy life together. We've enjoyed this campaign. It's been a good campaign as we've met lots of you out there. I have the opportunity now to be the governor, another opportunity for me. I want to be the governor of a state that provides opportunities for all people. Opportunity to have clean, safe drinking water. Opportunity to be free from this unfair tax that we call automobile insurance rates. I want to have opportunities for my two grandchildren, Matthew and Chelsea, and for all of the children. I have the basic values that will make those things come true. You believe that you should get $1 worth of value for every dollar you send to Trenton. So do I. You believe that there are certain decisions that are just so personal and intimate that you and your family should make them, not the government. So do I. You believe that if you work hard, you and your family ought to be able to get ahead. So do I. With your help, I'm prepared to lead New Jersey to its best days yet.
Thank you, Jim Florio. Jim Courter, your closing statement.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, when you go to the polls on November 7th, it's just a few days hence, you'll be going to your local school, local fire department, or town hall. You walk in the door, you'll pull open the curtain, and you'll see two names, Jim Courter and Jim Florio. When you talk about Jim Courter and you look at the name Jim Courter, I just want you to remember simply three things. Number one, I'm not going to increase your taxes. I haven't promised $1 billion of additional spending. He has. They'll have to increase your taxes. Number two, I'm going to make sure that we don't have more of the same when it comes to automobile insurance. I have a plan that will drive down rates, make it affordable to drive in this state. Number three, on crime, I'm going to make sure that we have the toughest laws in America. Make our streets clean. We're going to make our playgrounds free of drugs. And when you're in there, you'll see another name, Jim Florio. Number one, he'll raise your taxes. Number two, on automobile insurance, he's received $700,000 or $1.3 million from the trial bar, partly directly, partly by state funds. They don't want more of the same. They don't want a change. You and I know we need a change. So automobile insurance rates are not going to go down if he becomes governor. Thirdly, on crime, he's in favor of a death penalty that's never used. That's it. I'm asking you to just think about those three things. Jim Courter, no new taxes, affordable insurance rates, tough on crime. Jim Florio, a flawed death penalty that never works, higher taxes. and also automobile insurance that we'll never be able to afford. Thank you. Good night.
Gentlemen, thank you. The debate between the candidates for governor of New Jersey is just about over. We would like to thank Leo and Jim Quarter for taking part in this broadcast on WABC TV and WPVI TV. And thanks to the reporters who joined us tonight, Sal Palantonio of the Philadelphia Inquirer and Joe Gladding of the Associated Press.
We also want very much to acknowledge the New Jersey Election Law Enforcement Commission. Candidates who accept public funding are required to participate in this debate as determined by the Commission, though the television stations involved control the format and the content. For now, I'm Bill Butel of WABC TV.
And I'm Jim Garcia TV. Don't forget Election Day is November 7th, and you can have a say in your community only if you vote. And so, good night from the Trenton Bureau of WPVI TV.
Good night.
And there you have it, the second and last